On this week's show, discussing construction born digital with Dustin Burns from McCownGordon Construction. In this week's news, TCO of your building, 3D printing, rising to the challenge, and more. Well, good morning. How we doing? Jacob, good to see you on this false Tuesday morning, Monday morning, whatever it might be. My brain can't wrap its head around it.
Hey, I got the kids out of the house, sent them to school. They are about just as good as I am right now, and we'll all make it through, though. It's okay. It's a short week, right?
Yeah, short week, but I shortly started this too early. My kids were a little bit rougher than yours getting out this morning. There's something to be about having the extra day off that makes them harder.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I don't know what it is. It's something they put in the water, but I'd rather we have the whole week off and just have to deal with it. But Dustin Burns, I have been excited to get you on the show. Good morning, man.
Good morning. Good to be here. Good to see you, Jeff. Nice to see you, Jacob.
I think we're going to dig into a great conversation, but I'm already noticing right behind your head, the ones and zeros. I think that speaks right to the title that this is Construction Born Digital. If you don't know what that means, tune in because we're going to cover it. We'll get to Dustin in a second, but before we do, the cause of our show. Prevent construction suicide. We need more bold leaders willing to be vulnerable and open about mental health. This doesn't mean airing your dirty laundry, but being able to say, I've taken a mental health assessment and I learned some things about myself that are really helping me. Or I'm investing as much in my mental health as my physical health by practicing self-care, talking to a therapist, or engaging in my favorite hobbies. Those words come from Mandy Kime, Director of Safety, AGC of Washington. If you need resources for your company, go to preventconstructionsuicide.com for more resources. If you are in dire need, text or call 988 from your mobile phone, anywhere. Remember, we're back on YouTube. Check us out at youtube.com/@the ConTech crew. I'm going to sit down and be honest with you guys right now. I am not seeing enough of you in there right now. Get in there, smash the button. We got cool new things coming out, new snippets, new ways to keep you involved. Get out there, smash that button. Before we get into our interview, an ad. I'm here with Robert Shear, VP of Strategy and Business Development for OpenSpace. Robert, tell us a little bit about what is OpenSpace.
OpenSpace is a 360 job site capture, review, and tracking tool. Think of it as an up-to-the-minute Google Street View of your project that people can view anywhere, anytime. Some people also refer to it as like total project recall, right? So what if you could have a photographic memory for all your projects for all time in case something came up in the future? So that's really what it is. How do you use it? Let me grab my camera. You simply just attach a 360 camera to your hard hat, open our app on your phone, open the floor plan, tap where you are and walk. We take care of the rest. So as you walk, we take 2 360 images per second. You come back, upload them to the cloud, and we process that all together, stitch them together, pin all those images to your plans, and deliver it back to you as the navigable 360 environment for everyone to use and share. And typically we deliver it back to you in like 30 to 60 minutes.
And we're back. All right, Dustin Burns, Vice President of IT at McCownGordon Construction. Now, we met a while back, have had the pleasure of seeing you speak, talking to you, meeting you at the AGC IT forums. You have an interesting story, though. Normally, we go through somebody's history of where they've worked, all the different companies, how'd you get into construction. Tell us a little bit about, why you chose construction. I think you're a little bit unique in the IT realm. And then a little bit about your history.
I don't know if I chose construction or construction chose me. I think it's kind of like people say with cats, right? Like you don't go get a cat comes and finds you. So I think that's kind of what happened with me in construction. I was a small business technology consultant in Kansas City and was kind of running all over Kansas City Metro, putting out fires one after another, and came into a new business at McCownGordon and walked in the door, and it was one of those things where the people and the culture kind of smack you in the face when you come in, and you can tell that it's a different kind of a place. From the warm cookies to the fresh coffee to the smiling faces and all that sort of stuff. And so as time went on, I spent, more and more of my days, hours at McCownGordon, and eventually ended up becoming 40 hours a week of my consulting time. And so naturally they offered me a full-time position just to stick there full-time and take care of everything. And so, back when I started, it was me against the construction industry, I guess. Because I was by myself supporting about a $50 million organization with probably like 50 to 80 people working at it, and was responsible for, procuring all the technology, installing it, managing it, maintaining it, and then, also supporting the job sites. And, spending time on site is what I actually really enjoy, is being out there with the boots on the ground and seeing how, we put the bricks and the mortar together to build and change communities. We get to do a lot of projects that really impact society directly. And I would, I kicked around in my head a few times as saying is this the most important industry in the world? And what other industries exist because of this or wouldn't exist with it? And that kind of fueled my passion of, like, how do we do this better? How do we continually get better? How do we continue to improve what we do and how we build? And it always frustrated me that manufacturing and healthcare got all the limelight, right? All these changes in manufacturing have improved efficiencies, and everybody talks about construction being, inefficient or almost lazy in a sense, the way that other people talk about it looking in. And that really kind of frustrated me and wanted to put the hammer down and change it. And so I happened to, with the culture at McCownGordon, it was extremely innovative before I got here. And I was able just to kind of latch into it. And in the beginning, I was working directly with the founders, Pat McCown and Brett Gordon. And so I would be able to go into them and say, hey, fellas, we need to do this, and we need to make sure that our infrastructure is set up in a way that, we don't have downtime as a business early on in those pure IT infrastructure kind of things. And we did, as a construction company, we were really ahead of the times, but as just a standard business, we were ahead of the times. I mean, we were doing, this stuff's not exciting, but voice over IP phone systems and that sort of stuff, and server virtualization back in 2005. And it just, those kind of things just cascaded into, what probably one of our biggest revolutions is adopting SaaS for construction. And that really came from one of my desires to link the industry together better, and specifically our teams, because we were in those situations where the office had all the information and the field was receiving 3-ring binders of it on some sort of a regular basis. And to me, I always looked at that and I thought that was backwards, because all of the activities happening in the field, we're just ingesting all the cost information and changes in the office and processing it. And so I wanted to find platforms that put the field first and then embraced our trade partners and our architects to come along with us. And so that's where we started that trail down the SaaS path back in, I think it's 2010, 2012 timeframe, and kind of basically set the organization up to scale to what it is today. And so fast forward to 2023, and we'll probably put almost $850 million worth of work in place.
So like a 50 million to 850 million, you've been there, but digitally native along the way. You had the opportunity to stitch that together early. I want to take you back, because you talk about I know now I'll send you warm cookies and that'll be the way to get you to go anywhere I need you to go, right? But you talk about the cultures and being the culture and the founders and being ahead of the curve. I don't imagine that was purely IT. I imagine that was the company as a whole. What were some of the key differentiators when you walked in there? Because a lot of consultants, like, we don't want to just make that jump over necessarily to anybody. You had to have seen something that made that as part of the culture that was innovative, that maybe wasn't just tech.
Yeah, and I think I'm always a fan of the underdog. Always been one myself. And kind of had to come up scrappy and get what I get on my own. And so I kind of felt that same way with this organization, is we were a small company competing with large, sophisticated organizations. And so we were always the underdog. And as time has went by, we have always looked at, we were early on selling people, not budgets and schedules and bricks and mortar. We were selling people because at the end of the day, all projects have problems. But what the difference is in choosing your partner is one, finding a real partner, because partners will go out of their way to solve this problem amicably for all the parties involved, not just for the construction company, right? This is a highly litigious industry. And, we went our first 20 years without a lawsuit. And it was because we were constantly trying to find ways to stay out of legal situations because nobody comes out happy. And so we were doing things that some people would consider would say, well, why would you pay for that? That was clearly somebody else's fault. Well, but we took the position of that's our partner and we need them on the next project. So if we sink them now, what good does that do for them and the people that they employ and their families? And what good is it for us? So sometimes we would kind of, the best phrase there to say is just kind of take the short end of the stick and make the client happy and continue on.
Yeah. So you guys were way ahead on a couple different things. One, selling people. Right. We are preaching that right now. And it's still becoming, people are still just starting to understand that like your schedule, the way you do, execution, brick and mortar, like you said, is not your strategic advantage. Everybody's got that now. Your strategic advantage is your people. So you were ahead on that. And, I got into construction in 2012 and man, SaaS wasn't even, I saw some of the same problems you saw early on, and I was still, 6-7 years down the road from you. So it's a unique transformation to see a company stay ahead and then see the gains. So you started as an IT, one-man show, I take it. You're not that anymore. So talk to me a little bit about how you've progressed and watched the company grow. And then, this is something we see in SaaS. A lot of us in the SaaS world, when you have 15 people at a company, by the time you're at 100 people, it's a totally different group of people. You can't necessarily scale. So I think you being able to scale with the organization is interesting too. So talk a little bit about that transformation.
Yeah. But to your point, it's at these certain intervals of, 100 million, 250 million, 500 million, so on and so forth. It is a different company. It has to be, because you can't do business at 800 million the way you did at 50 million. It just doesn't happen. I always joke that back then I rolled out Procore in 2 weeks because I could get everybody in one room.
Yeah.
So you get everybody in one room, like, hey, everybody, we're going to do this thing and we're going to start in 2 weeks. And everybody's like, let's go. And now that, it spans regions, halfway across the country, and trying to get all of those kind of changes done overnight don't happen anymore. And so, one, it requires a person like in my position, I have to have a constantly evolving mindset of where do I focus my time? How do I provide the most value to the business? And how do I set up from an IT standpoint? How do I architect infrastructure that doesn't impede growth of a business? And I think that myself and a lot of my other peers, a lot of that paid out with the pandemic. Your organization was either like ours and we flipped a switch overnight and everybody went home and kept working, or you struggled through all of these pains of this antiquated infrastructure that you never invested in and paid the price during that time frame through a poor associate experience, client experience, all that sort of stuff. And so luckily, like I said, working with the founders, I was able to sell that vision early on to where brick and mortar shouldn't matter. And that's kind of where we were born digital, I would say, is we've always invested in it. And talking with my peers, we invest more than they do. And that's a constant battle. And it's not like they just throw money at me, right? We just have to we're constantly justifying and continuing to push the point of here's where the investments pay off and through our client experience, through our internal associate experience, through how our partners work with us, and then through scalability. How do you open up regional offices seamlessly?
Yeah. And Dustin, I'll say we're 15 minutes into this recording, and probably the most insightful 15 minutes we've seen in a very long time with this, but also one hell of a pitch for McCownGordon and who you guys are as a company to people coming in or even clients that could be listening, because all of that is key, especially going into the problem solving. One of the big things is I see a lot of companies still stuck with a infrastructure, like you were saying, it ages and they're not putting money to it, but they also make decisions based off of the size of the company right then, which doesn't impact, what they do in the future. And then that scalability becomes the big issue. How do you guys train the new ones coming in? How do you guys, keep growing? What have you seen with that? And where do you guys really dig in with like training, implementing new software, like compared to that was back in Procore right now? You can't do that all the people in the same room. So how would you roll out new software now? How would you kind of tackle that idea?
Yeah, but really underlying all of it is the culture, right? If your company has an antiquated culture or a lackluster culture or where people aren't incentivized to find new ways to do things better, good luck. I think that's kind of the foundation of all of it is the people you hire have to have a mindset of continual improvement and innovation. And so for us, to your point, today is not anything like how we used to roll out software. Today, there's so much of what we do, what we coin left of launch. And that's probably the bigger struggle that I hear most people have is they're not doing adequate left of launch work. And that is influencing internally, finding out who your champions are, who the business owner is. And the business owner of the initiative is the big key there, because traditionally the business comes up with an idea and the business typically goes all the way to the solution. And then they throw it over the fence of their implementation team. And they say, we've come up with a solution and we need you to implement it. That just doesn't work well. And it can work. And the only time that works is if the business sponsor stays deeply engaged. But in that typical mindset, they do not. They throw it over the fence and it's IT's problem or it's some other business group's problem, it's HR's problem. They need to implement it. And that's where I jokingly always say that there are two kinds of projects. There are business successes and IT failures. And so,
yes, there are.
Yes, and that comes from throwing the ball over the fence and saying it's your turn and we expect delivery on this date. And so we don't subscribe to that model here. We use agile delivery methods for our business initiatives internally. And it took a little bit of selling, but in construction, it's so easy to tie so much of what technology and software process and procedure is like to construction. They're doing pole planning all day long on the job site. They're dealing with reorganizing tasks and situations based off of what happened that morning. I mean, that's all agile stuff. I don't think we train enough on agile in construction. I think there's opportunities for that across the board, just even opening the methodology. But we have worked with the business to get them comfortable with getting 20% of a product out of a gate. And so I find that a majority of the value comes from 20% of the product itself. And if we can focus on and deliver that first and then iterate after that, it works really well. And the business really enjoys that delivery method. They get their product faster, something they can get in their hands and work on. And then over time, we refine it to become the near perfect solution. There aren't perfect technology solutions, but Jeff and I talked about that before. It's people struggle to take a technology solution that's not perfect. But if you give a perfect technology solution, we're in fear of losing our job because it does everything. And so what I've seen with typical waterfall delivery on technology implementations are you will work, deliver, and then you will modify until it's there. And so what we are trying to do is always do the modification, because a lot of that comes from great feedback that you get when you put it in people's hands. Just get it in their hands faster, so you're not wasting 12 months of design and installation or what have you, deployment, and then 12 more months of modification.
Yeah, that's great, because then you even have your little tinkerers out there that basically you're giving them 20% of what the product is, but it's all there for them. So now they're going to go and start exploring on their own and pretty much learn more than, hey, we're going to sit through a 3-hour training course and this is going to be boring. And you're just going to have to sit there and take it, but they're going to play on their phone. You have those people that do it, but then it's also the ones that aren't the tinkerers. They're not overwhelmed. This is a little bit at a time. Hey, we're going to put this in place. You can start using it now. You're not going to sit there. I mean, rolling out Procore across companies right now. I mean, people get overwhelmed, shut down. They don't use it then. I like it.
Yep. Yeah. And that approach we find also lends itself well to all of the beta testing and that sort of stuff that we're doing with our software partners. You know, it's now our internal folks know how we deliver technology to them internally. And then when they go to work with an external partner that's doing the same kind of agile delivery method, it's more comfortable. Like, oh, we know this, that button doesn't work yet, and this isn't the right color yet, but we know that we're clicking buttons and getting value out of it immediately. And so it really helps down that line.
Well, you hit on a couple things there. I love the construction and technology continuum that we're very, very similar. And you'll know this from our time at AGC IT Forum. Benjamin Crosby said, construction and software development are almost exactly the same, except software development doesn't have to worry about gravity. So yes, we can build a front end without the back end. Although I'll say with prefab, we're getting closer that like we can somewhat break the laws of it, not completely. But the other thing that I hadn't realized about kind of the evolution of construction and the evolution of technology and its implementation is you talked about that left of launch. I hear left of launch, I hear pre-construction, right? Mm-hmm. How much more time and planning and collaboration and going back and forth with architects and owners do we do now that we need to do in software as well? And as we look at software for our company, I think that's an interesting continuum I'd never thought about. What are some of the activities you guys are doing left of launch if somebody's listening and wants to learn like what that might look like?
Yeah, the left of launch activities differ based on what your role in the process is. Me personally, my left of launch is doing the investigation and knowing what I know about the business tip to tail. Is this thing actually going to fit? And if it is going to fit, what kind of human changes have to happen? The whole organizational change management aspect is bigger than the technology implementation. And I think that I'll say appification has kind of messed this up because people are used to getting the free app, the 99-cent app, whatever. I just click the button on my phone. I have it right now. What kind of deployment or left of launch does that take? It doesn't take any, but what we saw in the industry was all of these apps everywhere, and people were having these meetings once a month. What new apps have you found? What new apps have you found? And then people like me pulled all their hair out because
evidently you and Jacob went to the same school of that.
Yeah, there's no governance of any of that data or anything. And so, you might have a really cool point solution, but that data doesn't integrate to anything and it only works for one team. And as a growing enterprise, you have to see all of your data.
Yeah, unfortunately, when I was younger in life, I was the one that was like, hey, I found a new app. And that was pretty much weekly. So I understand where they're coming from. But coming back to the management, what are you going to do with it?
But it all served its purpose, right? It is one of those things of, and as we've seen now, a lot of these so-called apps have been acquired by these larger platforms, and they're now where they belong inside of a data ecosystem that provides intelligence, as opposed to just stuff everywhere, and making a couple people efficient versus an entire enterprise efficient. And so some of the other left of the launch stuff is really mapping processes. Have you mapped your existing process? I would say most organizations out there have no idea what their existing processes look like. And so before we go to step into introduce a new piece of tech or replace another piece of tech, we're mapping out processes to make sure that, one, we're not missing something. Because, sales demos are flashy, they're great, they solve all your problems. Then you install the software and you're like, oh man, we made some assumptions. And so if you don't have all that mapped out, then you're going to make assumptions, you're going to get it, and you're going to say, after you've looked at 14 software demos and you're like, no, I'm pretty sure this one did that. And then you realize that you selected a tool that you assumed this other tool was doing this function in this tool, but it's not. That's a different piece of software. And so there's just so much of the formality that you've got to bring to it. And the formality is not exciting or sexy or anything like that. It's just pure documentation and understanding your business, because not everybody is exposed to the business tip to tail like people in my positions are, where we see how finance interacts with HR, which interacts with operations. And so if you have a siloed procurement approach by chance, so say if your HR team has the wherewithal just to go buy software on their own, which I'm not advocating against. And in fact, my recommendation is that the people leading HR, the people leading finance need to be leading some of those selections of the tools that they're using within their groups. And a person like me just provides guidance and consultants over how does that affect the enterprise and then that's my job, is to stitch all that together and say, okay, we're going to build an integration from HR to accounting. We're going to build an integration from accounting to project management, what have you. That's where I come in is by saying I know how to put these together on the backside, because I want each group to have the best tool that they can possibly have and not limit the organization based on, well, it doesn't talk to that one. Well, today, those aren't that big a problem. We can make them talk.
I like that, because it was there. We had that conversation beforehand. There was just, well, it does that, but it doesn't do all of these things. And it's like, well, that's because they're in different worlds. Do they necessarily need to do those things, or do we need to stitch them together? It's a unique, different look. So you're very field first, and that's something I wanted to dig into, because I know a lot of construction companies struggle getting field adoption, and I'm interested in your experience with it and how that you've overcome it.
It has to improve their life. Right. But nobody turns away stuff that makes their life better. Everybody resists change. And in fact, we've pulled out the change curve graphic several times and be like, you're right here where you're frustrated and mad and confused by the change. Eventually you're going to be over here. And so, one, overcoming the fear of change. Two, back to the perfect technology. If technology is perfect, people start to get concerned that they're not going to have a job to do. And that's not what we're doing. My plan and my goal is to make the people in the field make their life better. They have hard jobs. There's no denying that right now it's like 30 degrees outside. I drive by a construction site every day on the way to work, and our people are standing out on a steel structure in the wind and cold, building a building. And I'm sitting in an office where it's 72 degrees and I'm wearing my, button-up shirt, right? Those are two different lives. And what I want is for those people in the field to be able to have the same kind of freedoms that people in an office do. If your kid has a soccer game, why can't you go? You know, like all those things that I feel that technology and efficiency can bring, it should be brought to the job site. And you know, we case in point, through some of our people processes, we come up with this month-long rejuvenation leave. And we have have superintendents that are taking a month off. That's fantastic. That doesn't happen that often. And so supporting things like that are these underlying technologies, simple as iPhones and iPads, to where, hey, maybe you don't have to sit in the trailer until 6:00 tonight to finish up your paperwork. You can go home and have dinner and grab your iPad and pound out a couple, you know, RFIs or what have you that you had to finish up that you wouldn't have been able to do before because it was all in the trailer. And so that to me is where we impact this. And then we have to get more people interested and involved in construction. One way to do that is to, you know, my daughter's 14 and she was born with an iPad in her hand, basically. And she shows up to work and they don't have iPads. They're not going to choose to do that. And I think that, you know, through safety technology, making the job site safer, you know, and using technology to just really improve what the day-to-day life is on site. And that's easy to sell. You know, if I come across and I say, oh, are you doing these process that takes you 2 hours to complete? What if we can turn that into an hour? What if we can turn it into 30 minutes? Everybody's going to be happy about that.
And I like that you approach the flexibility, like sitting in the office still, you know, we have to go to the office. We have to do those things, but you probably have the flexibility given the capabilities of the system that if your kid has a 3:30 doctor's appointment, you can wrap up, split, do what you got to do. And then later on that night, pull it up. We're not advocating that people work longer hours. We're advocating that people work the hours that fit their schedules, that fit their lives, that make this experience completely different. And it's rare to see someone approach that in the field. I'm going to gather that part of your 50 million to 850 million growth and being, you know, innovative, leave for a super, most people are freaking out right now because that's work time. But if you add that up over a super's career, they might get 5 more years out of their career. They might do jobs faster because they're reinvigorated. Like that's significant change. But I also imagine you've garnered from 50 million to 850 million a lot of wins. You know, that's the other thing that I think people listening don't always understand is it takes a win to build on a win. You can say, oh, it's all about field first. But I've been in companies that talk field first and implement back-end systems that just drive workload out. And I'm like, you're saying your field, you know. So imagine that you match
and
that experience.
It's not perfect.
No.
You know, and that's the great nature of the people that work in the field. They'll tell you all about it. And I love it. You know, I like straight talk. I like when I can go and talk to a carpenter or a foreman or somebody and just say, how's this working? And they tell you like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. It makes me do this, and this now. And so getting that feedback, and then again, all projects have problems. It depends how you react. And so when those people bring those concerns to you, do you brush them off and say, just do your job? Or do you say, that's valid feedback and we want to adjust and change? You know, it's part of what we're doing right now is reduction in tech stack. I don't want them jumping between 5 different apps on their phone to do their job. Everything should just be as near centralized as possible. Now, there are technology limitations around some of that the tools don't exist centrally. And so you got to use a few different tools, but we should all be looking at where and how we can centralize for these folks in the field that they're not technologists. They don't want to be technologists. They want to work with their hands. And that's, Jeff and I talked about this in the past, of like, that's me outside the office. Outside the office, I am not plugged in. I mean, this weekend I put a new swing arm on my daughter's four-wheeler because it was cracked. And so I did that, and I fixed a buddy's flamethrower, and I actually fixed a chainsaw too. I mean, this was a really good weekend. And I didn't think about technology once doing that.
You just said flamethrower.
Yep, you did. That was nonchalant.
You don't have a flamethrower?
Just another Saturday.
No, I'm going to be honest. Flamethrower is not in my arsenal. In fact, we're very different that way. You go out and get on the tractor, man, and that's where you feel comfortable, right?
Yep. Yeah. Split some wood, stack some wood, and rejuvenated.
We all have to have those. Mine is not in that world, but I have to go out and get in nature, and I have to go out and ski and do those kinds of things. And you won't see me connected as little as possible come Friday afternoon until this week, Tuesday morning, some weeks Monday morning, if I can sleep in, maybe Monday afternoon if I'm lucky. But I think that also probably garners you a better understanding of the people that you're dealing with. You're replacing the swing arm on your daughter's four-wheeler, and it's probably not warm. Maybe you got it in the garage, so maybe a little better, but it's hard work, right? You have a bit of an empathy for what the field does. And I don't think we have that enough in IT.
I agree. I think it's, it's actually what I do for my team here is we have a project management academy and we have a superintendent academy. And my entire team is required to go through both of those. Because, and I always preach empathy of, from a tech support type side of, hey, you may have somebody that's frustrated, a little higher energy or that sort of stuff. And I said, you don't realize what they're going through. I mean, they're out here, they're trying to meet a schedule, they're trying to meet budget, they're trying to, satisfy an owner and 500 trade partners on site, and their cell phone doesn't work. And that's a big deal, and they're going to be frustrated. And so, we have to empathize with them and say, I understand you're frustrated and a little bit worked up right now, but we're going to get you back on your feet as fast as possible.
Yeah. And I always look to employees that I'm working with and people I'm talking to is everybody has a personal life too. And you don't know what's going on with that other person's personal life. I mean, their mom might be in the hospital. They might be, their dog might be sick, but all these things are affecting them during the day too, that they're trying to deal with. So, it might be a hard day to deal with them, but you don't know, and you're never going to know, but always give them a little bit of benefit of doubt because you really don't want to be the one to push them and then it just make it harder. There's so much out there that everybody's dealing with, and everybody's so focused on me that it's hard to think about it. So,
yeah. No, I think, to your purpose about mental health and construction, 100%. I think that, just assuming that everybody's okay is probably not the right thing to do.
Let's just go the other way. Let's assume everybody has a bunch of things at home. I almost forgot which one of the shows I was on and said it. Everybody's got that load. There's something else too that I want to unpack from there, because I think, and I'll be honest, this had a huge impact on me in the industry, is there's this misnomer that because we're technologists, we're the smartest ones in the room. We're super smart. I can't tell how many times I've walked up to a desk or walked up to an iPad or sat down with somebody and they're like, "Oh, you're super smart." I'm like, "No." Like I'll go to Nacho Gallegos, this guy I worked with who was a scaffolding builder, and he would always, in the beginning, he was really trepidatious about bringing me his phone and asking questions and whatnot. And he's like, "But you're so smart," and I'm like, "No, dude, you see that scaffolding you just built? If I built that, everybody is in danger. Not just the people on it, but like the building, the people around. I can't do that. Every one of us." Especially is super smart in what they do. We just put this unrealistic ability. Like I'll use the Elon Musk one. Like everybody's like, oh, he's a freaking genius. Oh, he invented this and that. Is he really building the Tesla factories? Is he really building the cars themselves? No. Could he? Probably. I'm going to guess not. Right? Like you have to have a respect for where your intelligence is and understand that all of these people in the field are super intelligent. They just choose to put on a different work outfit and do a different thing a lot of times with their hands. But a lot of times the supers and foremen, they're not even using their hands. They're using this. Mm-hmm. They just know how the hammers move and how, the impact drill does this and where, the materials need to be stacked and how you stack them and batch them and all those things. So I know I went on my high horse, but how does that resonate for you?
No, I'm glad you said that. That is a thought process that I subscribe to, where I feel like it, and I get it too. It's like, oh, the tech guru or whatever. I'm like, man, anymore, I'm putting in help desk tickets. So don't put me in that class, first off. And second off, I think everyone's a genius. It just depends how you measure it. And I think it was Einstein or somebody that had this quote that was like, if we rated a fish on its ability to fly, like we'd think it's an idiot.
Yeah.
I love that. That is a nugget I'm going to use from here on out. If we rated a fish on its ability to fly, it would be an idiot. So if I rated you on how you use technology, then I'm giving you a system of rating that's just not fair.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and one thing I always say is, from a standpoint of dealing with technology, is that the people that work in organizations know way more about our jobs than we know about theirs typically. They use technology every single day. We don't build buildings every day. Right? So they know how to build a building, plus they know how to use an iPad, they know how to use a computer, they know how to use the apps to get the data that they need to make decisions. We know how to fix them and install them, but then that doesn't parlay into installing software. From a process standpoint may mirror construction. From a doing standpoint, no.
I'm going to tell you, I can deploy Procore, I can deploy Revit, I can deploy AutoCAD, I can install a field monitoring app. I still can't read the plans. I still can't build the building. I still can't do any of that. So you're right. They're, in fact, in many cases, a level above us. So, and that's gotta resonate for your team. It's got to help with the culture of where you guys are going.
Oh, yeah, the core business, and we're here to support them and make them successful.
And like from the BIM side here, some of the most valuable BIM people I've ever met, they have years of experience on site, and that's only going to improve what they can do. So there's so many technology and BIM people that come in and they're trying to make decisions or force decisions when they have no idea how it affects the site. So when we've hired people straight from the site that just did concrete for the past 19 years of their life, but their knowledge is so much more valuable than, a new guy coming off the street that can run Revit better than any other predecessor. So there's such a huge gap of, hey, do you understand how construction happens? Because if you don't, that could actually put a lot of us in bad situations versus, hey, if you know how construction happens and you need to learn how to use a tool, let's do it that way.
It always provides value when, with me understanding construction and how to apply technology to it. I just look at it differently than you would say a person that's been down a different track. And they look at what I do differently too. And that's why it's important that you have all of this kind of an open culture to where it's okay to call somebody's baby ugly. And in fact, like that's typically when I was doing orientations, bringing people into the company, I would say, anything that I'm doing that you think is stupid, I want to know. I really want to know. I'm not going to take offense to it. I'm not building an empire. I don't care. In fact, I'm building something that is supposed to live without me. And that's what we all should be doing is creating departments or creating companies that go on without you. Because if you're the linchpin, then what about all the people around you? That's not okay to do either. I don't think. It's just we've got to be in these situations where I'm not concerned about my job. In fact, I have it structured in a way that they can, hopefully nobody's listening. They can replace me if they want to, and somebody else can come in and pick it up. It's going to be a different mindset than what I have, and I feel that that's the value that I bring. But from a structure standpoint, I'm open with it, and you can bring somebody else and plug them in.
Yeah, I was going to say, nobody listens to this show. No way. Nobody heard that. But no, you actually hit on a couple things there. But the first one being, when I was a consultant, and this might come from your consulting days, but I would surprise clients when I would hand them over everything they needed to leave me. And I would say, listen, here's everything you need to leave me. I want you to stay because you want to, not because you have to, right? And I'm reading a book right now, and it's called Think Like a Monk. And the line that hit me the most that you just talked about, and I think maybe even your owners are thinking about this from a succession planning, is we have to think about planting trees whose shade we'll never experience, or we aren't doing the next generation justice. Right. Mm-hmm. If you leave with it a wreck and a mess, and you haven't done that succession planning, you're not doing the business justice. I wish I could keep you going, and we're going to, but we haven't techied you out, even though, swing arms, those kind of things are what you do on the weekend. You still are a techie. Somewhere deep behind the best beard in the business is a techie. If you're looking through in your techie mind for 2023, and now PSA to McCownGordon, this is not about what technology he thinks McCownGordon must do next. What do you think's the next big thing that you just look at and you're like, oh, shiny, I got to think about it. Ooh.
It's kind of been the same thing for the last few years, and that's data. I think that the construction companies, especially general contractors, generate so much data from pre-con to close out that they don't leverage correctly or to its fullest. And I think one of those things are, especially from regional and national contractors, there's so much disparity between branches. I talked to several people that say, oh, we've got multiple offices, and there's a person responsible for the P&L of each office. And so it's ran 30 different ways. Right. And so it takes corporate leadership that understands the value of that information on an enterprise scale to put the edict forward that says, we were going to do things similarly. Doesn't have, in my opinion, doesn't have to be the exact same, but all of the key performance indicators that we're watching at a corporate level have to be fed up from all these branches. And the crazy thing about that is it's not necessarily really impressive technologies that need to be put in place for all this to happen. It's people practices and data governance that have to happen in order to get there. Because a lot of organizations that I've talked with my peers, they may not even know what they have, let alone get to the point to like, here's what we want to collect, because they have no idea. And so I think data, which then presents your business to the next era of technology, which is AI and machine learning. I've always figured that a general contractor has enough solicited bid data to really know what it's going to take to build the building. And we do. We give, you're either in this range or that range, and you can pick, the quality of your building based off these ranges. Yep. And so I think companies that leverage that information strategically will outpace the rest of the industry. And there's more than our data. It's the data that we're gathering from all of our partners along the way. And at McCownGordon, we leverage this data to help make them better businesses too. And so when we see anomalies in data, we want to go out and share it and say, did you realize that your performance is X and everyone else is Y? Now, that means that you're outperforming everybody or you're underperforming everybody or you're right in the middle. And here are the things that we notice differently with working with your organization, and here are some changes you can make to be a more efficient partner for us. And so I think, obviously, the democratization of data, making it available to everybody. I'm not one to say, well, you can't look at another project's data. You're not the project manager on that project. Well, why shouldn't they be able to see some of the performance data there? And then, when it comes back to self-performing, if you're not collecting the data, and there's some really sophisticated organizations out there with self-perform that are doing a whole lot of data collection that know down to the T exactly what it's going to take them to put the work in place. And that goes back to another thing that I disagree with, is that the statement that we're not getting more efficient as an industry. I can't agree with that. I cannot agree with that. The things that I see some of our trade partners doing and some of the things that I see other GCs doing, there's no way we're not more efficient. I think buildings are much more complex, and we're building more in a more compressed schedule time frame, but I don't think we're slowing down any.
I have to agree with you on that one. But I saw it finally graphed for the first time this week, last Friday, by Charlie Dunn to show why we think that. And you're right. And I wish I could draw it or even explain it, but it is a coefficient of how complicated the work has gotten, how much work there is, and that we're losing people in the business. And so that has created this flat curve, no curve, in our quote unquote productivity and efficiencies. But it's really a coefficient of the things that we've done to complicate the process and complicate buildings, and not from we want to make this hard. It's like the laboratories and life sciences and hospitals and cancer facilities and higher educations that we build have much more different needs now. So you're dead right. I think it's just it's a pressure, and I wish I could do that. So I'll send it to you so you can see it, Dustin, because I'd love to see you and others start to take that, unpack it, and say, and this is in it to your data. Yeah, if I take the data and I just throw it out there and I don't give it any context, it looks like we suck. But ultimately, if I break it down and show you, you're going to go, I can't even believe we get a single building into the ground and hand it over for occupancy right now. I can't believe we get RCOs now, given the complexity. So totally agree. I totally agree on data. I could go on with it for hours, but I got to jump us in. I think we'll have you back on later on in a year or so, and we'll figure out where that went for you. Before we get into that, another advertisement. And I'm back with Robert Scheer, VP of Strategy and Business Development for OpenSpace. There's a lot of reality capture out there, a lot of 360 products out there. What really sets OpenSpace apart?
From the start, we really focused on speed and simplicity. If you want your field teams to use stuff, it better be easy, it better be fast. And so our focus is 100% on making life easier for people to build stuff. All our advanced tech is wrapped in a really super simple experience. It just works the first time, every time. And it works at the speed of construction, which to us means getting things turned around in less than an hour, so that if you walk at 7 a.m, by 8 o'clock, you can share that with your team and you can coordinate work and kind of track issues.
Awesome. Well, so who is really the OpenSpace product focused at? Are you looking at trade contractors, general contractors, owners? Who's your real, users?
Yeah, it's really all of the above. I think we started focusing on GCs, and I'd say that's probably most of our users. But now we've got real strong adoption with trades. A lot of owners are writing it right into the spec for the project. With the GCs, it's a lot of capturing maybe every other day, once a week, to really provide that context for the team. Trades tend to use them a lot more actively. They're using them to track progress, track team productivity. And then owners, again, love to have that sort of oversight and visibility into the project. We've got 100,000 active users on the platform. We've got our users have captured over 10 billion square feet in over 70 countries. And more of our customers are moving from using OpenSpace on 1 or 2 projects to really using it across their whole project portfolio.
That's awesome. Where can they learn more about open space?
Yeah, I'd point them to two places. One is openspace.ai. Check it out, look around. If you want to learn more, there's request a demo buttons all over the place. Click that. The other one is we're going to be at a ton of trade shows and conferences, both sort of national ones like AU and Groundbreak, but also regional ones. So if you go to openspace.ai/events and see a calendar and, stop by and say hi.
And we're back. All right, Jacob, what do you got for the news? Let me guess, something cool.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to take it back to my world. We're going to go back into a little facilities management. APA, which is the Association of Physical Plant Administration, basically facility managers for K through 12, universities, campuses, stuff like that, have a article that put out, and it's total cost of ownership. So TCO. So everything I come in here and preach about and talk about is the data on a life cycle versus just, hey, what does it take to build? Operating the building is typically 75% the total cost of ownership. So your design and construction is usually about 25%, and then it's usually about 3 times as much to operate it for 25 years. So what this article does great is break it down. It's not a engineering mindset. Hey, we're going to bore you with a whole bunch of words and walk through it. But it's really going to give you the idea of how to evaluate what total cost of ownership means and then kind of put it into place. So as you even get down, it starts talking about, principles and structure, how to look at it. But it even mentions the high idea of start with good data. Like that is important. You can't just take this handover and just think it's going to be great and then not realize that you're kind of losing it. It's almost perfect starting place for any facility manager that's kind of coming in and trying to learn, but also anybody in the construction industry that is kind of, hey, we know there's this whole idea of, facility management, total cost of ownership. Where do I learn more? This really gives you the opportunity to kind of come in and see how it works. Jeff?
See, I love this because we were starting to talk about looking at assets in our world a little differently. When you talk about ESG, when you talk about the future, we're not just looking at the cost of the building and flipping it. We're going to be looking at that 75% that it takes to operate it and understanding those left of center pre-construction decisions that go through construction that maybe you get some information from constructability, but ultimately, that final piece that we need to loop it all back is how did it perform? How is it going to perform over the life? Dustin, you said this earlier, we have all of this data and we have, we can kind of predict what some of these buildings are going to cost us within a predictive area. However, what I don't think we have is an understanding of, we might build it in here, but ultimately the TCO is here, or the asset performed in these ways. So to me, that's the key. And it's looking at roof predictive modeling down there. Just a nice example of, what it takes to make great decisions, get good data, gather that, turn it into some knowledge and create some wisdom out the other side of it. I love how it graphed that. And Dustin, I'm interested in, you had your data talk. So how does this kind of come together with it?
Yeah, there's multiple things you can do as a building owner to impact that TCO. And for us, we focus on impacting that 75%. We know that the 25% is in the construction phase, but there are things that we can do while we're building the building to impact that. And that so simple. 360 photography. You think about down the line, moving walls, putting in TVs, all that sort of stuff. People that don't have a set of 360 as-built progress photos are struggling way more than those that are. Mm-hmm. And so there are simple things like that you can have your builder do that impact the entire lifespan of your building. I know that myself. We built our own building. We've been here for 2.5 years, we've probably done 6 or 7 construction projects in it. So I know that there are always moves, adds, and changes inside of a facility that can be impacted by the intelligence that you get during the build process. The other thing we're foraying into is this idea of continuous commissioning. And so leveraging our building commissioning group to take and say, okay, well, your building's performing like this. Well, we're going to monitor it, because what happens when it's fully loaded with people? How does that impact the environment? What happens, with the other, well, you moved a wall. How does that impact? Did you think about rebalancing some of the HVAC? All of that sort of stuff that can kind of trickle in and save money over the long term, as well as making well-informed decisions up front with your system choices. Because and that drives itself back to delivery method too, which our preference is design build, because we can say, yes, you need air conditioning, but if you buy this type, it costs this much now and this much over the long haul, or that type, which costs more now but less over the long haul. And it all depends what you're doing with the building. Jacob, to your point, if you're going to live and occupy this building, those are different decisions. If you're a developer flipping the building, those are different decisions, and so it's finding partners that bring forth that information of, one, you have to stop doing low bid, hard bid type work, because you just get the cheapest thing that you can possibly throw in there, and it's going to be the most expensive long term. It all goes back to, do you just put down new asphalt over the concrete, or do you put down concrete? What's the best method for road construction and overall lifetime cost of it?
I love that you went there, because I think that's the part in my prediction for 23 and 24 is that the way we apply ESG to even what you're talking about with flipping, that they're going to have to make the decision to go with the chiller and the system that over the long haul is less, because the asset will actually be graded as less, even though, I can buy it for this, but it's going to have an ESG score that looks like this. And that's how you drive and change, all right, Nathan, I'll give you a little bit of money. Tell me how I'm measured and I'll show you how I act. They're going to change that measurement. And that's the future of how we push the entire industry forward beyond the ones who operate and live in those buildings. So, Jacob?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we found another topic for another show too, is this continuous commissioning, because that's where we're going to get that data back and say, oh, that mechanical system really didn't perform the way we wanted to. How do we know that? How do we understand that? And how do we, change our design next time? Working with a client right now that is actually grading basically design being put into a building, that's going to give them a risk assessment about that building over its life cycle. So if it comes in and it has, a backup emergency generator, then it gets a higher grade. If it doesn't, then you get docked. And they're now going to start understanding all these buildings, how those are put together. I'm going to jump over to my next one. I like this one. This one actually came up on my Instagram feed. I'm stoked about this one. It's kind of cool. It's definitely something we've talked about before, we've heard about, but goes back into the ESG thing. So title is concrete is one of the world's most harmful materials, and graphene could change that. So basically they have this new startup. It's a university out of the UK that is actually pushing around and monitoring this. But they add graphene as a small additive into concrete that then increases the strength by 30 to 50% and it cut emissions by at least 16% by 2030. That's what we have to hit. So that's what we have to hit for the Paris Agreement. And by doing this with that, you can use less concrete and actually design for it. The additive is a 0.01% into the concrete. So you're not looking at adding this huge amount of new material that's going to actually cause different outweighing, we have to bring in new trucks for it. No, this is a very, very small change that has a huge impact across all the industries. So it's actually gone through 1,000 different projects, and it is now going to public consumption. So it's actually going out where you can start using it on more and more projects as a public material.
This is an awesome one because when you look at graphene, the one of the reasons that it's not already there and not already, they kind of knew this already, but graphene couldn't be produced at the level it was needed, even though you need very little into the mixture itself. It couldn't be produced, but there's been impact and change in that world. And so now graphene may be available, and this may be another reason to fortify and change the way we do concrete. I mean, it is a crux of our industry. It's a challenge, though, I think, in the end, like anything else, we can make a difference. We can change it. Dustin, I'm interested in either, this material or other materials changing and their impact on how we build.
Yeah, beautiful thing about human ingenuity is you give us a problem and we will attempt to solve it. And we'll try to solve it a million different ways until we find the right solution. I think that we all agree that construction, like I said, is one of the most important industries. It's one of the largest industries, and it also utilizes the most materials and transportation and all that sort of stuff. So I think we have to look at it tip to tail to figure out where we can create positive environmental impacts along the way. And I think that, looking at concrete, looking at steel, looking at the major material uses that we have, that those are all good ideas to push this forward.
Yeah. And one of the other pieces of this article is that, what graphene can do to the strength, because some of the problems with innovation in concrete has been if you're using recycled materials, it doesn't produce something that is as strong, that holds up to as much. And then that causes its own set of issues. We have to use more. And if you have to use more, then why not go back to the original, because you're doing the same thing. So this graphene will allow us the ability to strengthen the materials so we can use more recycled materials inside of the mixture itself. And again, like you said, give humans a problem and we're really good at solving it, as long as we, again, put the measurements out there, put the reasons out there. So I'm going to do a segue, though, because I agree with that. And I think the segue is, my first article is about 3D printing and 2023 3D printing predictions and investment experts' view on the future of additive construction. So this is from 3dprint.com. This is looking at the future of additive manufacturing, additive construction, whatever you want to call it. But what's the number one thing we see printed over and over? Concrete. So again, if we can increase the sustainability of that innovation, increase the and change the actual materials themselves that we're 3D printing with, like concrete, because that is one of the bigger problems. If you think back to the Fred Mills episode, we started in on concrete for a while, and why it might not be the way to move forward from an efficient material mix. And now you've got this idea that maybe we can do some innovations there. We can make some changes there. And I think also when you think about the 3D printing of concrete or 3D printing of any building, you're limited in the scale. Currently, you have things out there like Apis Core, and it can print a house and it can be brought there, but you don't think of multi-story. You don't think of those kinds of things, but we are seeing it. The largest 3D printed building project is underway in Texas right now, and it's COBOD is the group doing it. We've covered them before. They've got this, for lack of a better term, it's a scaffolding that moves, that 3D prints, extrudes prints along the way and prints the walls. It's amazing. But also some movement forward in building codes. One of the things that holds us back in the industry is building codes. So those are starting to come forward. We saw the first of it out of Australia and New Zealand starting to loosen up and get there. And I think we're starting to see that in the US, and maybe that'll drive us. So I'm interested. I'm going to go to Dustin first on this one. Dustin, what are your thoughts on 3D printing and additive manufacturing for construction?
I think it's definitely a key to go forward. I remember when we got our first 3D printer at the office, when my CEO texted me from somewhere. He's like, "Oh, have you seen these 3D printers?" I'm like, "Well, I have one in my shopping cart right now. Can I press buy?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so we started printing little models and that sort of stuff, and always with the thought that we're going to get there of how are you going to print a house with this? And then after we master printing a house, how are we going to print a commercial building with this? And I think 3D printing concrete has a similar problem as modular construction does, is our egos don't always fit a certain pattern. And so we want a custom, structure or whatever that isn't picked out of a magazine or whatever. And so as soon as we can solve that problem with modular and with 3D concrete printing, I think the industry opens up at that point to say, hey, now you can really do some custom things with this, and it's structurally sound. To your point, the building codes allow it, and it becomes more efficient. Everybody wants to build with less money invested. So if you can get the same quality with less money, then those are easy to sell. And I think, like to what you said with the graphene additive to it, if we can continue to morph concrete into something that's more sustainable, stronger, taller, wider, everything that everybody's looking for, you have a lot more luck with that.
Yeah. Jacob?
Yeah, and actually, I think you touched on why our industry is so inefficient is our egos. We can't build the same building over and over. We're going to change that structural bay by 28 by 28 to 28 and a half by 28 and a half next time. And it's just, we do never want to do it again. I love this. We've talked about the 3D printing a couple of times on the show, a couple of different articles. It's really interesting because I feel like 3D printing has all of a sudden just boomed back into the industry. I feel like the past, 3 years, maybe even it might have been COVID, but it got really quiet. I think people started realizing, I don't know how it's really going to scale. But now something like you see this MakerBot again. This thing is just, it looks just like the 3D printer you have on your desk, but it's on a large scale, the size of a house. And it's amazing that they are doing this. I think it's incredible. I think resiliency with buildings, and you think about hurricane coming through, they would be able to make a building so much more resilient than a wood frame building, and it would be safer. Now we're looking at long-term use. It's really cool. The other thing, like you said, Jeff, ICC has an appendix to their code, residential code, cited in here, and that is one of the first to come through for 3D printing. So now you even have the ability to go to your local jurisdictions and say, look, ICC is citing this. This is how we reference it. How can we also do this locally? I think this is a huge step. I'm excited. I can't wait to see what it is. And I really can see kind of in the future, like this same concept being applied to high-rise buildings, just the same way that we do like lift slabs. And we basically pour and then lift it and jack it up and pour and then jack it up. We could look at the same idea with a MakerBot. So
I've been consistently wrong on 3D printing from the beginning. I think maybe we've just passed through the trough of disillusionment. I'm probably wrong again, but I love bringing it up because you guys can keep throwing it back at me and I can keep being wrong and then I can keep changing my mind. That's the elasticity of what we have and the fun, right?
Have you seen a room-sized 3D printer?
I have not been in the room with a room-sized 3D printer yet.
One of our partners here in Kansas City prints some large-scale stuff. I think they did the entry monument at the Raider Stadium is all 3D printed. I mean, it's a massive, massive thing. They're printing huge pieces of furniture, all sorts of stuff. That would blow your mind if you see it.
And so that's kind of like precast, and then they're bringing it on site, tilting it up into place, and hey, even better, right? That's awesome. I'm gonna hold you that. I've got to get to, if it wasn't for Ryan Johnson, I wouldn't know you. So thanks to Ryan. And Ryan, let's get there so I can go tour this facility, Dustin. That's something I want to see, man. I want to see that one in person.
We'll bring you over.
All right. And my last one is going to end on the good one here. Builders rise to the challenge at Tucson Research Facility. I'm really excited to cover this one because it's a combination of building techniques, thought processes, and look, some pressure. So who doesn't love a good pressure cooker? So this is all about the University of Arizona's $99 million Grand Challenges Research Building, which had to and needed to take the place of two athletic venues that were sandwiched in between current research facilities. So not only did they have operating facilities around them, they also had the challenge of matching it to the other buildings. And Kitchell Construction came together to use a prefabricated facade system. So, I wouldn't call it modular, but prefabrication. And I'm absolutely enthralled with Jason Anderson and the team over at Capture Prefab. That's Kapture, Capture Prefab, because that's who did these exterior skins for them and the facade so that they could be placed in. But they also had to do a ton of other planning and used a little friendly robot that we've covered on here for multi-trade layout called the Dusty Robot. So this was really about, a grand set of challenges, designing a skin that matched. So they used something that would actually rust over time to match the copper that existed on the other buildings. So they were matching those facades. They also, the caissons that they poured, they scheduled the caissons for the summer to make sure that they weren't shaking the ground and interrupting the other facilities. So when you think about the left of center work they had to do in pre-con, this had to be part of the schedule, part of the process. So I just love to see that there's people covering. And so this is from ENR.com. It's the ENR Southwest. You can take a look at it. I am just a huge fan of what those groups are doing. And we're seeing a ton of this in that area right now. And I just wanted to hand it out because, and Dustin, you'll like this. The project was awarded under a progressive design build contract prior to the start of COVID-19. And it was Kitchell Contractors, ZGF Architects LLP, and WS Architects to fully complete the design in the time frame they had. So 2021 to February of 2024. So keep your eyes on this one. It is awesome. It's just great to see builders doing this. Jacob, we talk about a lot of this, but this is seeing it in action.
Yeah, I'll make this one short. I love it. I can't wait to see more of it. This should be a part of designer every day is saying, hey, could we design this where it's an off-site thing brought in and put onto the building that is then, so much easier for them to build. It's beautiful too. I think if you get some of those pictures and everything, it's beautiful. I resemble this back to Shop Architects did something very similar back in like 2005. It was one of the first things in New York City with, 8x4 panels, concrete panels that had different brick pattern waves on them. But it was a matter of prefab all site using it as a facade. I love it. I can't wait to see more of it, see it keep growing like this.
Yeah, they even did some work with the way the decking was and the decks are to shade each other, knowing that it might get a little warm in Tucson every once in a while. You might need a little shade. So they even thought through that. So Dustin, I'm interested because it is a progressive design build and you started there. This is it's a key to how we deliver projects in the future.
Yeah. My opinion is design build projects garner the best outcomes, especially for the client. And I think that there is a concern from taxpayer funded type design build to where, municipalities have had this position where they say, oh, we're spending taxpayer money, so we need to spend as little as possible. Well, we already talked about this. You spend as little as possible, and you got the cheapest thing that we could buy, and it then becomes the most expensive thing you can own. And which doesn't do the taxpayer any favor.
Well, and in the end, we know this, and somebody out there is going to come after me for this one, but we also have figured out in that world of design, bid, build, what the taxpayers, but what we believe they have an appetite for. That's what we go on the referendum. That's what we get approved. And then do you really build a school halfway, 3/4 of the way and go, crap, we're out of money, we're done? No, you either speed it up with crappy materials and you build it poorly and then the school sucks forever and nobody wins. Or we could say, hey, let's shed a light on what this really costs us to build, what it really provides to the taxpayers in the long run. again, it's a tree whose shade we might never, my kids are past those days, but other kids can experience these learning facilities, can experience those things. So I think you're dead on, Dustin. It's been awesome to sit down with you today, man. I have been, a fan for a while, since you got on stage at AGCIT and we got to meet there. And it was a pleasure to finally have you on, man. So I appreciate you stopping down and having a conversation.
This is great. I appreciate it. Both of you. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thank you. We're gonna see you back on, man. I look forward to seeing you out there in the world soon. Jacob, as always, my man, thank you for starting off my Tuesday, Monday, as it were, whenever people are listening into this one. Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
No problem. Thanks again, Jeff.
Thank you for tuning in today to geek out for our interview with Dustin Burns. To read all our news stories, to learn more about apps, workflows, and hardware, and to listen to the show, visit thecontechcrew.com. This is the ConTech Crew signing out until next time. Enjoy the ride and geek out.